So the bit that everybody's actually here for, we're going to spend the next 20-30 minutes or so talking about processes and that how you can help set your business apart in a crowded market. So lots of businesses tell Go for Growth that it can be really difficult to stand out. Often the market might not be as crowded as it feels to a small business, but it can be fairly competitive in some sectors for sure. So I'm just going to go through 4 questions with Kevin today and draw on Kevin's experience. So Kevin, would you talk us through initially what pre-market engagement is, the forms that it can typically take, how pre-market engagement could be a positive for a smaller organisation or a voluntary organisation for them to get involved in, what kinds of ways the market can take part, and will you talk to us about what you do with that engagement and intelligence that you gather?
Sure. Pre-market engagement is absolutely vital to successful procurement. So any organisation that is looking to be successful in its procurement approaches shouldn't just be putting out tenders and bids and quotations without some form of pre-market engagement. Simply put, it's because the supply chain and the organisations, just like yourselves, are the ones that are operating in that business, in that environment each and every day, and you will be the experts. So if we haven't had discussions or some type of engagement with the supply chain, inevitably our tender or our bid won't either be constructed correctly, we won't be asking for the right thing, the right specification. And at North Yorkshire County Council, we call it the discovery stage. So everything before a procurement is published, we call it discovery, and it may be in the form of discovery days, market research, so some desktop research, also talking with certain suppliers, so it could be some face-to-face meetings or meetings over Zoom or Teams. But really that's our chance and our opportunity, first of all, to understand what the supply chain looks like, who are the organisations operating in that area, but also to have some of those more sort of grown-up discussions around, this is what we think we need as an organisation. Are we right? Are we on the right track? Is it possible? Is it deliverable? Are we being innovative enough? Actually, as the market and the supply chain moved on, and actually we're asking for something that 10 years ago might have made some sense, but now it just feels maybe a little old-fashioned. Or have things moved on, and if we ask certain tender questions or terms and conditions in a certain way, we would be disadvantaging maybe SMEs or VCSEs. So really it's our opportunity to be a little more sophisticated and intelligent around what we're doing. So for me, I cannot stress the importance of this stage, but equally, on the other side of things, this really is the time for you as potential suppliers to be getting in front of the right people, to be having those conversations, and really to be making that impact. Because while this stage is going on in terms of data gathering, intelligence, and market assessment, that's really the opportunity where there's no rules around the procurement process. We can have those open and honest conversations, and that's really an opportunity to influence the organisation, influence the people who are working on that project, coming up with a specification, and influence how the final contract will look and how it will operate. So really that sort of 18 months before the contract starts is actually the key time, because by the time the tender gets published, everything's locked down and nailed down pretty much. But your opportunity at that point is to, or before that, is to get in and make sure the tender or the bid or the process is structured so that you have the best opportunity to succeed. So yeah, in terms of that procurement process, that pre-market engagement is absolutely vital. And of course, think on our side as a tender team, we don't have infinite amounts of resource or time to search every supply chain to make sure every supplier is out there. So again, this is where standing out from the crowd is really key. So make sure that you are one of those organisations that that we know that we need to speak to. Get yourselves in front of the right people. I'm conscious I might sort of drift onto some of the other points, Jill, around sort of meet the buyer events and innovation festivals, but these are the opportunities where you can make sure that you can influence, because that is the key. That's where the value is created. It's not the process itself, it's how it's constructed. So that time period before is absolutely vital.
Thank you. I think that's really interesting, Kevin. So I think what I heard you tell us was that the pre-market engagement is a definite opportunity for businesses, any businesses, to have a voice, to really get involved and almost not to help specify, but to really help to shape what procurement could look like when it comes to fruition. Do you think it's always around 18 months in advance, or can it sometimes be closer to the event? Is that generally kind of the timescale that businesses should expect?
That's a very good question, Jill. Ideally, it would be 18 months, but sometimes timescales are tight. So it might be 2, 3, 4 months before. But really, what we aim for is 18 months out, we start our discovery work. So it's sort of that 12 months, 18 months, right down to 6 months before. But equally, we have known procurements that are really urgent, and it could be sort of a matter of a month before where we're doing that. But really, and I guess that's where trying to sort of keep abreast of the opportunities, understanding where they're advertised so that you can take an opportunity to take advantage of those whenever they occur.
Perfect, thank you. And on the Meet the Buyer event, so we did a poll at a recent event where I think there was around 170 businesses that we asked whether they'd ever attended a Meet the Buyer event, and a whopping 85% said they'd never been to one. How are they advertised? How would people find out about innovation festivals or Meet the Buyer events or other networking opportunities?
Yeah, we try and use a varied approach to advertise those. So as a minimum, if you're registered on our e-sourcing system, we would advertise them on there. And just to use this opportunity to flag that it's changing at the end of this year. So you will have seen lots of, or hopefully seen lots of adverts on social media and council websites to let you know that there's a new portal to register to. That's where, as a minimum, those type of events will be advertised. But we would use the council's social media. We would contact suppliers direct who we've known and worked with before, just to flag those, because really we want the most wide, diverse and vibrant attendance at those events. But certainly social media, the usual communication channels, and most definitely our resourcing system is where we would advertise and flag those. And it would be a repeated thing. We wouldn't just advertise it once, we'd get it out there and make sure as many people know as possible.
Brilliant, thank you. And you alluded to it a few minutes ago, but during the competition, things can often, well, they do change, don't they? Would you, I often find with businesses, and I absolutely understand why, if you're not in public sector procurement, you have no need to be so intimately, converse on how this whole thing works. But we're encouraging businesses to network, to get involved in events, but then there is a point where actually that can't happen any longer. Would you just tell us a little bit about why things close down and how they close down, and how businesses should behave during a competition?
So as part of the procurement regulations, as soon as that tender is published, everything is locked down. So in terms of your interaction through the team, whereas before the tender's published, we could be having meetings, discussions, phone calls and what have you. As soon as that tender's published, because it has to be open, fair and transparent, that previous behaviour has to stop. And it becomes a very locked down and strictly governed process. And that's quite right. That's a protection for everyone, for us as procurers, for all of the suppliers in there. It's a lockdown process. So whereas that sort of freedom and flexibility, that pre-procurement discovery stage, that discovery is finished, and now it's a very strict legal process in terms of that procurement. There's lots of rules and regulations around that. So in terms of the interaction, it can only happen through the official channel, which is to ask clarification questions through the e-sourcing system. And those questions can either be answered on a one-to-one basis, but if it's a question that would impact the entire process, and the answer would help everyone, then those answers are made public. But really, that's still not something you want to shy away from, because sometimes suppliers think, oh, well, I won't ask the question because it might be, the answer might be shown to everyone. Well, you can request that it's a private response to the organisation, but it's still an opportunity to ask the right questions and actually think about your ability. You're showing that the bidders that you're still interested, that you're really thinking about that process. You're trying to be innovative, so you can share ideas, you can challenge. And actually, even if you've missed the entire pre-procurement stage, you can still ask some questions around, well, why have you asked this? Have you thought about this? If we were thinking around offering this as a service, would that be acceptable? So although it's a lockdown process, we tend to find suppliers probably shy away from asking questions, when actually I would encourage you. It's like that expression, there's no stupid question. So if you think you need the answer to help you with your bid, just raise the question. And we've done procurement processes that have had hundreds of clarification questions. And actually for us, that's really quite positive, because we can see supply chains really thinking about it and challenging why things are happening. Our ability to change things at that point is really limited, but it's not impossible. So yeah, never shy away from that. Use that system, ask those questions, and it'll be dealt with in a fair and transparent manner.
And I think it's a key point that there is no silly question. So you can almost guarantee, I think, if one organisation is thinking of a question, actually there's probably more organisations that would be really welcoming of seeing that answer coming out. It's a difficult psychological environment, I think, is the tender when you're a bidder or a potential bidder, knowing how to phrase your question. But it's great advice, ask away, I think. Obviously, public sector work in the main, not all of it, but in the main, it is awarded through a competitive process of some sort. And that's a regulated process, or it would be your own internal rules that are at play. But there will be an infrastructure at play. And generally that means there will be winners and losers. And there is a feedback process in the public sector when you're not successful at winning the bid or the quote that you've put in. Would you give just your view on that feedback process, about how important it is, for it to be done, and how you try to do that well generally in the public sector? And if it's important for commissioners and procurers to see businesses doing something with that feedback when they have been unsuccessful?
Yeah, again, it's really vital. And it is part of the regulated process that we do provide that feedback. And it can be difficult. So you only get to tell one bidder, or maybe a couple of bidders, that they've been successful, and the majority will have been unsuccessful at that point. And that's always a difficult conversation to have. But again, in terms of being able to learn from and understand why, and then use that knowledge and understanding to be able to build from there and improve on certain areas, it's absolutely vital. I've been through one feedback process where literally the organisation were tearful, understanding why they were unsuccessful. I remember that from many years ago, one of my first times in the public sector, and it is not lost on us how difficult it is to receive that information. So we always try and give it in a constructive manner, in an empathetic manner. But for us, it's around growth and being able to understand and learn from it, because it's no good not taking advantage of that feedback. And we get that it will hurt. People put time and effort into bidding for these contracts. And if you're unsuccessful, that can be a really difficult message to receive. but really it's around getting better for the next opportunity that comes. As you alluded to at the start, Jill, the wider public sector spend is huge. So it won't be too long until the next opportunity comes along. It might not be with North Yorkshire County Council, it might be with one of our sort of other organisations that are in our region, or nationally, or central government, other sectors, but those opportunities will come along quickly. And that feedback process is less around trying to point out on a negative, it's trying to give opportunities for improvement. And remember too, it's part of that transparent process. So your protection as well of understanding how the decision was came to. And taking aside the sort of difficulty of having that message land with you, understanding how the process worked, how it was marked, how it was scored, why your bid didn't hit the mark, or where it was just short in a couple of areas, we think is really, really valuable feedback. So notwithstanding that disappointment, if that feedback can be then turned into some learning opportunities, some understanding around, actually, I might have a weakness in that area, or my experience, or maybe I didn't articulate it quite how I should have. It's being able to learn from that. And actually, next time you come to put in a bid, you can make sure that you hit the point on that area, and it will lead to improved bids. So every time you go through a process, picking up the areas where maybe the scores weren't quite so high, or there was a little area of question marks, if you can nail those, everyone is improvement, and it just increases your chances of being successful every time you go through it. So it's a learning process. It's that corny phrase of a journey, but if we could use it to improve every time, you as an organisation will get fitter and stronger in terms of your ability to bid. We as an organisation get a more stronger competitive supply chain and supply markets, so everyone wins, everyone gets better from that.
And I think, would it be fair to say the learning is both sides as well? But, you know, part of what the pre-market engagement does, and then the tender itself, it tells you about market capability, and it helps you understand as a public sector procurer what the market has to offer and where there are peaks and troughs in that offer, and helps you as an organisation over that long term support that sustainable growth. Again, what we talked about earlier on was, it's not just about one win, it's about the long term stability of organisations and supporting that over many years, not just through one competition. So as you say, Kevin, if you don't get the answer you wanted on this one, actually maybe you won't necessarily have to wait until that one comes along again. There are lots of other opportunities in this marketplace that any learning and improvements should help give better, stronger, build fitter businesses to be able to, you know, to go on positively in the future.
Yeah, 100%. And it may be something that we suggested something at the pre-procurement stage, thought it was a good idea, maybe something to do with the terms and conditions, but at the end of the process, it may well have been proven that it wasn't quite the right idea, or something that, as part of the way the process or the bid was constructed, didn't land well for a certain part of the supply chain. Well, that's an issue of learning on our side. So the next time, as you say, that we go out and procure it, we can use that, and we use that to inform the next process. So you're quite right, it will help you as an organisation bid for other public sector contracts, and it'll help us get better the next time we come to this, to understand if we've done something maybe a little differently, or constructed it differently, we could have got a different outcome.